Alrighty everybody, and welcome back to the video. Today I'm going to be going over a little bit on Lorelei, as there have been quite a few questions. Is she good? How well does she work? So on and so forth. So it's a very interesting topic in which her character, her kit all seem very interesting, one of those good on paper types of things. I will just preface this by saying that she does do well in story when you're pushing under deficit, and that's been the biggest use I've seen out of her so far. So I'm just going to go over a couple of things that I've noticed in some of my tests here, where I spent about an hour and a half or 2 hours on stream, just testing different functions, different interactions, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to see all of those hour and a half tests me. Oh, I wonder what this would do. Okay, how about this? And so on and so forth. Now I'm just going to briefly go over some of the things that I've noticed. So first off is her basic attack form. It says deals 69% attack damage to enemies in a rectangular area ahead, applies 1 stack of Siren Song. So the Siren Song is what is basically getting her sleep. 4 stacks is when it basically sleeps enemies, and it's for 5 seconds. So that is important to know. 4 basic attacks is basically what is needed to get that stack, but how many is that? So in testing this, I noticed that every single character attacks once every 4 seconds. So it's taking her roughly 16 seconds to get the stacks going, and then it lasts for 5 seconds of sleep. So the other thing that I noticed is that if you do her ultimate form when enemies are sleeping, then it becomes useful. So basically you need to wait 16 seconds before using her ultimate once, which means that in a normal rotation, if you're doing like a 3-3-4 or something like that, or a 3-3-5, or sorry, 3-3-6, would still be 12 seconds, which means you still couldn't use her in the first rotation. So she's not going to be used primarily for damage. Her damage output is not particularly high either. She doesn't work well with Pavana either, which was very interesting, and the reason for that is because they don't work together, because Pavana's kit is also 14 seconds her sleep will trigger. So basically every 4 basic attacks she does the piercing the target and inflicts sleep with 4 seconds. So even if Pavana hits first because she's ranged, despite Lorelei being a melee character, if you look at her range, it's very big for a melee character. Well, if you look at somebody, this is what a typical melee character looks like, is something like this. So Lorelei actually is a mid-ranged attack dealer. Well, this is a ranged attack dealer. Once she's in the Siren form, that's when she's actually getting into melee range. And then her going into Siren form also seems to swap the targeting priorities, and enemies will start to attack her when she's in her melee form. So that means she's very susceptible to getting killed, especially if you're in a high deficit like this, almost 27k below BP. If I was to try to attempt this, it would be very difficult, but you could stay alive for a long time because of it. The other misconception is that basically sleeping enemies will not wake up during this time. So what people seem to think is that if you cast her ultimate, that'll put people to sleep. That's incorrect. Only the selected target, so when she ultimates and chooses this character as an example, only this person will be put to sleep. That's if they aren't already put to sleep. So the best use for interaction with her and pushing content when you're under BP is to wait until the enemies are all asleep with her basic attack, and then to use her ultimate. And then if you have a low enough BP cost in your energy rotation, you're able to get her ultimate going again, which is basically giving you the 14 seconds plus the 11 seconds, so that's 15 seconds right there, plus an additional 11 seconds. So that's how people are able to push under content, is because they're basically getting a 26 seconds of enemies getting put to sleep. But unfortunately, that because it's the 26 seconds of sleep, and then at 28 seconds is basically when she should be able to get her passive stacks going again for her basic attacks to get that Siren Song, making them sleep again. But her being in Siren form is not affecting it because it changes her attack, so then you have to reset the rotation. So she doesn't have a perma CC. There's a period of 14 seconds after that, 25 seconds before you're able to do that. So if you do this correctly, you should be able to get 3, so you're getting 1 minute and 15 seconds out of that 2 minutes where enemies are sleeping. So that's huge. That's more than 50% of the run where the enemies are going to be constantly put to sleep. So that's a way to push under power. The other interesting interaction is, what is this rectangular square area? So when I was first testing, I was imagining something very small like this, but it's actually very, very large. So basically, if I was to put her here, all of the enemies that have a hitbox within basically these 3 columns, and then just slightly outside of it as well, is basically going to get hit by her hitbox, as long as the enemy target is right here. So, and it's fairly wide as well. It's basically like a 3x3 grid almost, but it extends slightly towards the sides rather than forwards or backwards. So that's a huge hitbox compared to Pavana, where hers is basically line piercing. So in PvP, it works a little bit better in the sense that if you have 1, 2, 3 enemies in a line, it's going to hit and sleep all 3 of those enemies, while hers, it's going to hit the 3 whatever in the columns. And so Lorelei actually does fairly well in PvP, while Pavana does not. The other issue is that her targetable puts enemies around it asleep. So usually she's gonna be a stupid AI and is gonna target just the front line and say these guys have moved forward, so they're meeting right here. It's just gonna put these people to sleep, leaving the damage dealers in PvP to actually still be killing you. So Pavana in PvP, not as good as we thought. Lorelei in PvP, fairly decent. She's still kind of squishy though, but fairly decent. So that's a good interaction to notice, is how that rectangular area forms. It's actually way larger than it seems. The other interesting thing about this, each enemy eliminated during her ultimate of Siren Form increases the duration of it by 5 seconds. However, when I was testing this, this seemed bugged, and I could only get it to increase by 1 second every single time, no matter how many enemies were killed. And this was, I tested it while under power, while over power. I tested it in Mausoleum. Mausoleum, it worked fine, where she basically had unlimited teleports as long as there was an enemy within range. But during this, I could not get it to last more than 1 second. And I tested whether it was any enemy was eliminated, whether she was the one doing the elimination. It did not work. So I think the tooltip is incorrect, and it's basically if the enemy is one shot by her teleport and doing this 805% attack damage, then it increases it by 5 seconds, because Mausoleum was the only place where it was able to work, and that's when she was able to go to a full health enemy, hit it, and one shot kill it. That's something else I noticed while testing. The other thing that I noticed is that there is no buff indicator for her sleep form, and so she'll turn into her octopus, is kind of what it looks like, teleport to the back line, starts attacking, and then after it's done, then she'll teleport back to her original spot. There is no marker on where her position is, so she could have been here, she could have been here. You wouldn't be able to tell where that marker is, so that's something I wish that had gotten added. If Pavana and Lorelei are both trigger their sleep at the same time, Lorelei's is going to basically overwrite Pavana's because it's a higher duration, and you can't have similar effects at the same time. So it doesn't add it, doesn't turn it into 4 seconds Pavana, 5 seconds her. Lorelei for a total of 9 seconds, it just goes 4, 5, and then it's just 5 seconds. The other interesting thing was on her teleport and this attack, where it says it deals 805% attack damage to the selected target. It's actually incorrect again. So she actually, when she teleports, she'll do 3 back-to-back swings. She'll also go slash slash slash, and then she'll do 4 back-to-back instant swings. So she'll go slash slash slash, then she'll go tut 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 really quick, 1 2 3 4, and then she'll wait and then do 1 big swing. In this stage specifically, when I was testing it, it was doing 451 damage for the 7 swings, and then the big swing was doing basically 2 times whatever that damage was. Hers should actually read something like 805 over 8 hits or something like that. And I did some testing on see what the actual target, like how much it actually was, and I got 2 different numbers depending on how the defense interaction works with her attack points, and then as well as what is it called, the stage stat BP deficit penalty. Because I don't know the formula, I was unable to determine what it is, but it's basically 8 attacks between 74.4% to 82.3%. Alrighty, so here we are. I've pulled up the guidebook real quick. I don't have an icon yet for her. I'll probably just use the in-game icon as soon as I get a screenshot of it. But in testing, I just threw out some random numbers here. I think overall she's fairly she's okay. Compared to Dalcarlo and Lamia, both of them are very good characters, can be thrown in a lot of comps, and don't need any other types of characters for supporting in it. Well, Lorelei is very specific purpose, so I want to say she's more of a niche character, but she does that niche so well that she can be put into specific places. So where you would use her is basically in pushing upper high level story. So initially in the early stages, chapters 5 through 8 or whatever, not so good, just because there's other characters that could do better and you don't really need that CC. Even in chapters 9 through 12, I was hesitant to put her to an S rank here, so I might go back and drop this, but chapters 13 and up, you would use this because it's very difficult to overcome the BP deficit, especially if you're more of a free-to-play player. In Mausoleum, she did kind of okay. I test everything with Van as the baseline, and so she did okay, just because she could continuously teleport and one-shot them. So the further more gear and levels you have on her, the better she will be at this mode, just because she'll just be able to continuously one-shot enemies. But basically, as soon as she hit an elite, it was like, and with a wet noodle, and then she couldn't do any damage, and then that was it. She was okay. I tested her in Kingdom Tower. Again, it's kind of similar to here. Right now, it's hard to tell because everything is very low BP, but you'll be able to use her to be able to continue to push, just because there aren't a lot of other characters that do CC well in the Kingdom Tower. And so she's going to fulfill that role very, very well in pushing for that. So I rated her fairly highly in there. I went back and tested her against several of the boss modes, and because bosses are typically immune to hard CC effects, she didn't have very good damage output either. Was not very good at Zagon, Easy Pass, Soulless, or Baphomet. Again, hard pass. In Clive and Sheila, I did some testing. I was like, oh, okay, maybe it'd be pretty good in some of these ones. She didn't have enough damage to kill the Clive ones for me, and then even if she did target, she would usually, if it was on auto or something, it would usually target the elite. Then she wasn't able to kill the elite in one shot. It depended in the first phase, at just entering the second phase, Blood Moon going, she was able to have that damage boost, and she was able to kill the first, basically, werewolf, because it had already been auto-attacked a couple of times in between the rotation, or it was already weakened. And so she was able to get that going, but it just was not very good. Sheila, again, the enemies were much more tankier than the Clive ones for the summons, and then she would just constantly target the boss, and so again, low rating on that one. I tested in all three of these modes. All three of them have different types of summons, and again, she just was not able to do well on them. In the Phantom of Aeon, she was actually able to one-shot the crystals in the first, basically in the first stage, but once the boss enters the second phase, then she wasn't able to one-shot them, and thus became useless. So that's pretty much my ratings for her. I didn't put her in rating down for PvP just because I'm still testing what types of comps could work well with her. But in my testing, I'd say she does fairly well, maybe an A-ish range, maybe to an S range. So that just, again, needs further testing in that. So hopefully that kind of explains a little bit more into her kit, her uses for her, and helps to answer the question, is she good? So I look forward to seeing you all in the next video, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.